Commissioner, you said something before the break that I want to build on, this idea of framing social safety net delivery and reform around this idea of freedom and the American dream. And that's, to be honest, that's not something that you hear a whole lot in these kinds of conversations. I want to read an excerpt from your book, Our Net Has Holes in It, which again we'll include a link to in the show notes for our audience. I want to read this excerpt because I think this kind of captures what you're saying, that I wonder if you can expand on it for us to help us fill in the gaps of what we don't typically hear in social safety net conversations. So here's the excerpt from your book. You write, "The most fundamental problem with the American safety net is its lack of a shared vision and overarching objective. This book endeavors to offer a shared vision, an overarching objective, and a pathway to get there. We begin with a grounding principle that the American safety net should align with and support the intentions of the founders of our nation. They set out to create a society where all the citizenry could enjoy the greatest degree of freedom while still having support for their safety, health, and commerce. Following those founding principles, we believe that the safety net, or system of public support, should be dedicated to ultimately enhancing that individual freedom envisioned by the founders." Again, that's from your book, Our Net Has Holes in It. Commissioner, the reason I kind of fixate on that in conjunction with the comments you just made is normally, I've been to a lot of events and spoken about this issue often to a number of different audiences, and, usually great constructive conversations about this stuff. Those of us who are our audience out there watching or listening to this, they probably hear about this stuff in the news. There was, of course, a lot of discussion last year in the One Big Beautiful Bill about things like work requirements. And so those who are in or sort of familiar with the discussion around social welfare policy and safety nets and things like that, it is usually dominated by, well, how do we provide services to folks to alleviate material suffering? And then we're trying to tack on more of the, well, we also want to help get them back on their feet and move toward work-based self-reliance. Your framing is a little different. It's different in a positive way. It's this aspirational. I'll be honest, I don't know that I've heard at all, or certainly not very often, connecting the purpose of a government-funded social safety net back to the founding ideas from America's founding fathers. Can you expand that a little bit for us? Because that's really unique, I think.
The problem with the safety net writ large is it is something that we, if you would cobble together over time and different political events, but we did not have a true north in mind. It would have been, whatever the events were of the moment, it had us build something or tack something on. And we never took the time to say, when I was a youngster, my father said to me often, when you're up to your elbows in alligators, it's difficult to remember that your original intention was to drain the swamp. And so my question, the one that Net sets out to answer is, what is our original intention? And so I go back to that mother sitting in that chair that you referred to, okay? One of the first lessons that came to me in my work in this space is no one in their right mind wants to be a ward of the government this way, okay? Now, they may not believe they have the capacity to not be, but no one chooses to be. And so what I believe then the role of our system of public support should be is to help that vulnerable individual or family find their way beyond that vulnerability to their own freedom. Because again, that's what the founders set as the basis for, okay? And unfortunately, We have devolved into that very discussion that you just laid out. Okay? Again, not focusing on sort of an overarching intention. And there's a particular place in the book that I want to bring to your listeners' attention. It's a chapter on the Winchester Mystery House. And let me explain quickly. The Winchester Mystery House is the home of Sarah Winchester, who is the heir to the Winchester rifle fortune. Born and raised in Connecticut, Sarah had a couple of very significant tragedies. She lost her only child, her daughter, to a horrible childhood disease, and not long after lost her husband to a disease. And being a spiritual individual, she went to see some mediums to ask them what she should do with the rest of her life. And the guidance that she got was that she should move out west and start a building project that would help atone for all the lives that had been taken by the Winchester rifle. She moves to San Jose, California. She purchases an 8-room farmhouse. She hires a construction crew and begins a process every day for the next 33 years. She would sketch something on a napkin, give it to her construction crew, and tell them to make that. Years later, this 8-room farmhouse was a 166-room edifice. Okay, but the challenge is the edifice made no sense. There are stairways that are right into ceilings. There are beautiful stained glass windows up against brick. There are doors that you open that if you open the door and you take a step, you will step to your death. Okay, and I use the metaphor of the Winchester Mystery House to juxtapose against our system of public supports. We just, without any kind of architectural rendering, without a blueprint, we just put stuff together, program after program after program after program, with no overarching thought. And so those folks who are in the positions that I'm in, who administer the system, what we get held accountable for is administering those programs. We don't get held accountable for the well-being of that woman in that chair. And that's my argument. Shouldn't our intention be that person's freedom and well-being to live a life beyond being a ward of the government?
Commissioner, that's an incredibly powerful metaphor, and it's much more thoughtful than the one I usually use in these kinds of conversations when I go and speak about social welfare reform. I've often invoked the example from the Harry Potter books. The Weasley's house is sort of haphazardly designed and odd, but it's held up by magic. That's the only reason it works. And so, but it's funny because it's a similar kind of thing. It's like the system is not really designed. It's sort of cobbled together haphazardly in a way that creates tremendous problems. It's tough for states to administer. Here in Utah, we have what's been called now the one-door model, where the large bulk of these social welfare programs and our workforce development programs are co-located under one statewide agency, and that's created some real advantages for us here as a state. But it's still sort of, we're doing the best we can at the state level with a very poorly designed federal system. And then also it's tough for the family. So can you maybe expand on that? How do you view sort of the poor design, and what's the practical effect of that for you at the state level, for the families you're trying to serve?
The practical effect is that we have created a maze for that consumer that needs these supports to navigate. And Nick, the truth is, okay, I am a veteran of this system, okay, and I couldn't navigate it, okay. There is no way that a family struggling to put a roof over their head, or someone in the depths of addiction, or someone just coming out of incarceration could ever navigate the mess that we put together. And while there are interventions in that maze, again, for every condition known to humankind, it wasn't designed in a way to be able to navigate it. And I think that this is something that we'll spend a little bit of time on in the next segment, but it creates things like the benefits cliff, in which, because we have no overarching intention, and the programs were not meant, they weren't built to work in conjunction, you put consumers in a difficult space to make poor choices on their own behalf. And what really troubles me, Nick, is that we ultimately, in many corridors, blame the consumer for the flaws of design and operation of the system. Okay? The system actually puts people in a place to make decisions that are not in their best interest. And nobody in their right mind would do that.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.